Hello and welcome to the Straits Times panel discussion on cleanliness in the time of COVID-19. I am Audrey Tan, Science and Environment Correspondent at the Straits Times. This is a special edition of The Big Story where we discuss how to keep clean to keep well amid the current outbreak. We have 4 panelists with us today, all adhering to the recommended social distancing measures to discuss the topic of hygiene and cleanliness from different angles. First up, we have Mr. Masagos Zulkkifli, Minister for the Environment and Water Resources. Mr. Masagos also heads the new SB Clean Task Force, which aims to raise hygiene standards at a whole-of-nation level. To my far left, we have Mr. Edward De Silva, Chairman of the Public Hygiene Council. The Council conducts advocacy work to urge people to practice better hygiene habits. Next to him, we have Professor Wang Linfa, an infectious diseases expert at Duke-NUS Medical School. He is the director of the program in emerging infectious diseases and is one of the leading experts helping Singapore battle the ongoing outbreak. And finally, next to me, we have Mr. Choong, director of the Department of Public Cleanliness at the National Environment Agency. Mr. Thai's department is in charge of providing guidance on cleaning and disinfecting premises which have been exposed to confirmed cases of COVID-19. Since the start of COVID-19, we have seen countries, including Singapore, impose increasingly stringent measures. Just over the weekend, after the first deaths from COVID were reported here, Singapore announced that it will be further tightening its borders. All short-term visitors will no longer be allowed to enter or transit through Singapore from 11:59 p.m. today. This follows other measures, including rigorous contact tracing, quarantine and home isolation orders, and stricter social distancing recommendations. In light of all these measures, how important is personal hygiene and cleanliness in dealing with COVID-19? So, Minister, as chair of the new SB Clean Task Force, maybe you could start.
When the COVID-19 came out, even not so big in Singapore, we already in the ministry saw the opportunity to heighten our society to the need to maintain, in fact, upkeep personal hygiene. But more importantly, we also saw the necessity for our cleaning companies to also increase the standards with which they are cleaning the premises. And we started with that. We heightened our cleaning companies to look at what they can do in a normal case, not in sanitizing places where they have cases, but in places where there are high traffic, in places where people eat together, come together. That was the genesis of the SB Clean campaign. And then later on, we saw also the need to do 3 other things, apart from just increasing the standard of cleanliness that's supposed to be maintained by our cleaning companies. One is to also inform the public that they too have a very big part as the first line of defense in the fight against this COVID-19, and that is their personal hygiene. Because if we can practice our personal hygiene to a better and higher standard, maintain that will not only help us to fight COVID-19, but also for future viruses when we have to face them. And then the other thing we also want to imprint on our society is the need to also adjust our social norms. Some for now and some for good. So where social norms is concerned, we want everyone to know that in certain specific settings, there are certain social norms that you want to do, for example, hawker centers, places of worship, and so forth. Each of them must implement new social norms for these new circumstances. And then as we move on, we also have to know that some of these social norms are here to stay.
So people as the first line of defense.
Absolutely.
So Edward, you are chair of the Public Hygiene Council. Maybe you would like to chime in on this?
Okay, I think Minister has said everything really in the beginning, but I'll give a little bit more of a background leading to SB Clean the Meno speaking. I think last year already there was already talk between NEA, MEWR and public hygiene how to raise the standards in terms of sanitation and public hygiene. So that's already ongoing in a way. Am I right, Minister?
That's right.
Yes, we were all going. And I think we were looking at how we could cover all aspects of our society, including the first line of defense, as you mentioned, and looking at premises as well. So this was ongoing, and then COVID-19 came about. So that gave us a timely opportunity to increase and to enhance and to jumpstart this whole process, as what Minister has talked now, SG Clean. So that is the background of how it's come to this stage now. And at the same time, whilst that SG Clean has got the precautionary measures to be taken, we are still going ahead with or without COVID, we will still continue with raising the standards of public hygiene and personal hygiene. And that will be a long-term plan that we will have, that we will take on in the years ahead of us.
Since Edward has mentioned, he's opened up the secret of how he started this. I want to also then say, actually, one of the real genesis behind this was actually the incidence of gastroenteritis. People having symptoms of food poisoning, especially in places where people are vulnerable, like childcare centers, and then also senior care homes. And we were perplexed why this was happening place after place. And then we came to the conclusion after a number of investigations that it has to do with how the cleanliness, clean up after a vomiting has happened, or this incidence, food poisoning has happened in the places. And then we saw that there's a need to basically increase the standard of cleanliness, to train our cleaning forces about what it means and how to do the cleaning of places for this specific incident of gastroenteritis. And this somehow just segued well into what we need to do today. And so SG Clean was born out of something that we thought we need to address, and now become something that we can use for something we need to address, which is a bigger problem that we are all facing today.
So I guess for both these cases, it really highlights the importance of environmental contamination. Right? So Prof. Wang, can you just share with us from the scientific point of view, what do we know about the coronavirus so far, and how can public hygiene and disinfection routines help get rid of viruses lingering on surfaces?
Yeah, I think it's very relevant, right? So we already know now the main form of transmission is actually through droplet or contact, right? So that contact can be handshaking, but that contact also can be you lift the button, you go from open the door, the same button if somebody push and you push. So this is really in the context of hygiene, that I think not only that you clean the surface, many of the hand hygiene liquid and gels, and also the disinfectants, like the minister just said, in a health center or somewhere, that if you have an incident after that, you need to really clean well. That not only really provide a clean environment, but we know that coronavirus is what we call is an enveloped virus. So the virus actually have a lipid membrane outside, and to maintain the intactness of the virus, you need to maintain the lipid. And so many of the cleaning agents actually can dissolve this lipid. And so that's why I think it's very important, we wash our hands, either with soap or sanitizer, or 70% ethanol now is being used to spray. All of these will not only clean the environment in the general sense, but more specifically for this COVID-19, you can actually disrupt the virus and then prevent the transmission. So it's very relevant. Yeah.
So a virus, once the structure is disrupted, it won't be able to infect the host.
Definitely. So this is where I think right now in the general public, we're talking about, for example, the test we're using right now is actually called a PCR, or polymerase chain reaction. So that is zoomed into the genetic material. So this is, for scientists, we really have to differentiate between a live virus, has an intact structure, the lipid is intact, and that can transmit and cause disease. Versus if you have a little bit genetic material left, like environmental contamination, we can still get a PCR positive, but the virus is gone. So this is kind of a very, very difficult. The only way we can detect is nucleic acid material. And this may or may not mean that we still have a live virus. Okay, so that's why I think it's very important to keep the hygiene. At least we can get rid of the live virus that's transmissible. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that raises a good point. Like, even though a virus can be detected there, it doesn't mean that it is available to infect
That's
a host.
right. Yeah.
Okay. But some readers have raised this question, on our social media channels. With all this talk about personal hygiene and social distancing, how safe is it if we were to ride a public transport and, be exposed to viruses lingering on the surface? Is it okay?
Well, I think, scientifically that I always say in an outbreak like COVID-19, I cannot advise a measure which is 100% efficient or safe, right? So I think that, if you avoid contact, even if you have to go to a public transportation, the chance, in Singapore to get a contaminated MRT, for example, is very low, right? The other thing is that, as I say, I always say, I have said this to Straits Times, I have said to many media outlet, a closed environment like a lift, I think, that everybody push the same button. Yes. That's much more, riskier than any other environment. And so you just have to be cautious, So I carry 70% ethanol all the way now, just spray on your hands. Or the other thing is because if the hand is contaminated, you're still not going to be infected. Only when you rub your nose or your eye. So you just need to be cautious that when you go to public, even if you have touched lift a button or open the door, and then as soon as you get to office or home, wash hands. So that's, I think, the best you can do.
I like to share what I learned from the Ministerial Task Force experts within. I think there's a very good guideline or frame to look at this exposure. Or risk to this exposure, and it is in this DID, duration, intensity, and density. So if you are in a situation where there are a lot of people, the number of people is huge, like the one that we had at the mosque in Malaysia, that is high density, and you want to avoid that kind of situation. The other one is intensity. How close are you to the person? How much you're interacting with the person, and that was very apparent in the case of the Jurong Safra case, where they were going after that to the karaoke and they were passing mics and maybe even hugging each other. And then duration, how long were you there? And the rough guideline is about 30 minutes is okay. And therefore, if you can break this in any social setting, social norm, you can ensure that you have short duration, you have low intensity, and you have low density, then you are safer than not. So I think that's how we are also advising places of worship, hawker centers, and that's why you see this social distancing. Don't stay too long in the hawker center, eat and go. And don't stay too close to anybody. So is it safe to go to a hawker center? I say it's yes. But the issue is how do you enforce or how you implement in these new social norms so that the DID is also being observed.
Okay. So, I mean, on that note, on cleanliness and disinfection of premises, we have seen reports about how some premises are disinfected and cleaned up after they have been exposed to patients with COVID-19. Mr. Tai, your department is in charge of providing guidance to such cleaning up measures. So, can you just take us through what is the process like?
Okay. I think Prof. Wang has said that the evidence does suggest that surfaces that are contaminated with COVID-19 virus is able to transmit the disease. So that's where NEA comes in. Basically, NEA has developed a set of interim guidelines for disinfection together with MOH and NCID. So we work with premises owners to ensure that they follow the guidelines closely. So whenever there's a case that is being reported to us, we actually will contact the premises owners and work with their cleaning crews, okay, and ensure that they wear the proper personal protective equipment, and then ensure that they use the right disinfectant, okay, and we walk them through all those frequently touched areas. So for disinfection, I think a key point to note is that we must be aware of where are those so-called frequently touched areas we call it high touch points, where examples, lift buttons, rails, handrails, benches, tabletops, or even your workstation, your desktops. So we work with them to ensure that these are properly wiped down with the disinfectant that is effective for COVID-19 virus. Then for those residential premises, there are two groups of people we work with. Okay, the first group is actually the household that has actually encountered a confirmed case. So by the time it's reported to us, the case will probably have already hospitalized, but the household members are likely to be quarantined. So that's where NEA comes in to advise them how to all the proper disinfection procedures, the kind of disinfectant to use. So NEA, we have actually prepared a small little disinfection kit that comprises of mask, gloves, and a bottle of disinfectant, and together with the hard copy of our guidelines. So we visit the household, we explain to them, run through the guidelines with them, explain to them what are the things that they should take note of. And at the same time, we also offer our assistance to them if they should want to dispose of certain materials they think is contaminated. For example, a pillowcase, a bed sheet, then we can arrange for a disposal service to dispose these as biohazardous waste.
Okay, so I mean, you mentioned about when you clean residential properties, you recommend a special kind of disinfectant. For our readers tuning in, they might be interested if they can also get hold of such disinfectants to disinfect their own houses. I mean, do you have any guidelines on, just now Prof. Wang talked about and ensuring that hand sanitizers are at least 60 to 70% based in alcohol? Is that similar for the disinfectants?
Yeah, okay. Actually, we have a list of disinfectant we publish on our websites together with the active ingredients. In fact, most households have this common household bleach. They'll be very effective. Yeah. So actually, everywhere we go, we actually recommend you have household bleach. Okay, that will actually effectively disinfect.
Okay. So how does this cleaning process differ from regular cleaning processes?
Okay. Okay. Let's take for example. Okay, if we go into a housing estate. Okay, let's say. So we work with the town councils. We basically run through with them where are all those high touch points. Okay, the frequently touched areas. So we begin from the confirmed case, the unit floor. Then we think through basically what is the footsteps of everyday residents that he need to go through and surfaces that he need to touch in order to commute from point A to point B. So from the unit level, probably the first thing you need to touch is the lift button. So that need to wipe down, to be wiped down with disinfectant instead of lift. Then when he goes down, okay, in the void deck, any benches, any tabletops, letter boxes, okay, or the nearby playgrounds or exercise areas. Yeah, so we literally have to put our mind into the mind of a normal residents that things that they have to touch in order to move around. Yeah, so that is something that we pay attention to, and that the cleaning crew might not be so aware of this area. They just sweep the floor, but we actually raise their awareness to all these kind of areas that they need to wipe down.
Okay, so this is for like the cleaning standards for the current outbreak.
Yes.
Okay, but regular cleaning standards, like regular cleaning standards, you won't have to put yourself in the shoes of a patient and actually walk through while doing the regular routine cleaning.
Yeah, but I think following from this this outbreak, I think it's good that all cleaning companies and cleaning crews should be very aware of surfaces. Yeah, so we should adopt this higher level of cleaning, okay, for their regular cleaning.
Okay. So on that note, I mean, that is what the new SG Clean task force established earlier this month aims to do. So Minister, can you just give us a run through about what this task force is about and what it aims to do?
So firstly, we look at the three areas that we want to emphasize, like I mentioned just now. The first line of defense, your personal hygiene, setting social norms for different settings, and then getting the cleaning companies to up their cleaning standards and also frequency of cleaning. So that's the gist of what we do. Initially, when we started, we focused on hawker centres because MUA and NEA are running them. Right now, I know all of them are already certified for SG Clean, but we want to do more. Where the cleaning frequency and standards are being implemented, that's all right. In fact, more than 5,000 premises have already got the SG Clean standard. But we want to ensure that this is also being implemented beyond the hawker centres, which is why the ministerial task force for SG Clean was formed, so that every sector of the government, whole of government effort, as well as whole of society effort can be then rolled out. That means schools, that means shopping centers, that means tourist attractions, everywhere where there's high traffic and where public need the confidence that they can congregate. Even having said that, given the new situation that has evolved day after day, we also have to put in different kind of social norms even as we up the cleaning standards. So in the past, we tell people go to the hawker centers. Don't stay home. Don't be frightened of going out. But then, as we are also getting, as we see today, more and more imported cases, particularly from Singaporeans returning from studies overseas, the risk of people not observing quarantine or stay-home notice and then going out to these places where we are not controlling the numbers of people who ought to be there is now very apparent. Therefore, we start to also shift the kind of social norms that need to be implemented. So one of the things that we are doing is social distancing, and to make that more a norm now, and then implement that also through infrastructure. So as you see in hawker centers, now more and more of them, right now 41 of them have got crosses or lines on seats to guide patrons that please sit further from each other. And the same thing is also being rolled out for places of worship, gyms, even spas, so that people know when you are in this kind of place, this is how we should be behaving, how we should be interacting with each other. So that, like I mentioned just now, that those DID, the duration, intensity, density norms are also being implemented in these areas.
So, Minister, just now you talk about ensuring the cleanliness of public spaces beyond places like hawker centres. So currently, under the SG Clean Task Force, will premises that don't adhere to the standards be penalised?
Well, this is the thing about being Singapore and Singaporean. I would be very sad and, in fact, very upset that we have to enforce something that we could actually do voluntarily. It's just like littering, why do we need to impose a very big fine for people to prevent them from littering? And actually, the number of people who actually litter are very few. I think Edward has
I'll talk about that later.
They are not, the recalcitrants are very few. But then in the case of this virus, Prof maybe would like to comment on this. There is something called the R0, which is the how fast and how contagious this virus tend to be. And therefore we have to be paranoid to prevent even one person from infecting bigger number of groups, and then you have secondary infection, second, third waves, which we are seeing in places maybe like Italy, where they did not implement such more stringent norms. Now, when that kind of risk starts to appear, or we start to identify, I will get the ministries basically to really implement more enforcement measures, put new legislation if we have to, and regulations to ensure compliance.
Well, hopefully we don't have to reach that stage.
I think Singaporeans are better than that.
Yeah.
So, Prof, correct me if I'm wrong, R0 refers to the basic reproductive number, and if it's more than 1, it means the virus spreads. And if it's less than 1, it means the outbreak can be contained.
That's right. So, as the minister says, the R0 is obviously a very important number for any outbreak, right? So currently the extreme is measles virus is equal to 12. So, and then influenza is 2 to 3, SARS and COVID-19 is around 2 to 3 as well. But this is the R0 of natural spread, right? So that's a very important. And for country like Singapore, we will drive the R0 to much less than 1. That's what our aim is. So social distancing, the hygiene, DCP, try to avoid the two teams work together. It's all try to reduce that R0 to less than 1. Okay, I think so far we're doing pretty good, but I think we need to really keep the stringency and not let to relax. So R0 is a natural number in this day and age. The society, the government, and to me, the most important is still every citizen. I always say, every citizen, not only in Singapore, every citizen on this globe now has a role to play because we individually can drive that R naught down. Yeah.
So since we are on R naught, a scientific concept, I'd like to bring in another scientific concept on the epidemic curve.
Yeah.
So recently we have seen epidemiologists and other clinicians taking to social media with the hashtag Flatten the curve, referring of course to the epidemic curve, but maybe you can just tell us what the epidemic curve is and you know how hygiene and cleanliness can help to.
So the epidemic curve, again, is, there's so many experts which are not in that field. Basically, it's a mathematical modeling, try to predict how the curve is going to behave. And then the only way you can do that, the most important parameter is R naught. So now from, I think the large numbers of the Chinese, studies, the R naught is around 2 to 3. So scientifically, we agree on that R naught, but that's a natural R naught, as I already said, right? So then in terms of how the curve will behave, it depends on how efficient that each government and each individual of the society can work together and bring down that R naught. So the flattening the curve is the common sort of buzzword. Many countries, Australia, USA, Europe is all using it. Because to complete contain it, like what the Chinese doing, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, the East Asian sort of nations and regions are still aiming for the containment, just like we did successful for SARS. So that's the scenario one, that really the most ideal scenario. But many of the Western nations feel like it's too late to use that model. So the next best thing is to flatten the curve. It means that you do some of these measures to make sure that the R naught does not go to 3, like naturally the virus have. So you want to bring the R naught maybe to 1.2, 1.5, so that you don't have a huge peak, mainly because that even for a country like USA, if you let the natural R naught to play out, the hospital will collapse because there's not enough bed, there's not enough ventilator. So the strategy is to flatten the curve so that, for example, you have severe cases of 10 per day rather than 100, 1,000 per day. So that because the severe cases, if you have the best intensive care, like what we did in Singapore, unfortunately we have 2 deaths, but still we have many more severe cases than the deaths because our hospital has the capacity to help. So this is what other nations try to do, is that when you flatten the curve, at least the severe cases, you can save their lives. But eventually, what you want is a vaccine. So the strategy one is flatten the curve so that the hospital system does not collapse. Secondly is hope you give the time so that a vaccine will be ready, and then eventually the vaccine comes in, then you not only flatten, but you suspend the curve, basically. Yeah, that's that theory, at least.
So, Edward, you have been campaigning for public hygiene and cleanliness for years now. So do you think this outbreak will be a turning point in society?
Yes, it will be. And when this happened and when I had a chat with Minister, I said this is the best opportunity, time to revive and bring back social responsibility. And I think Minister has enunciated some of the physical measures that we talked about, maintaining that. But I think we all have, there's another area more importantly, is the personal responsibility. I think that's far more important than 2 meters apart and all that. You can have all that, but if you don't take care of or are responsible of your own actions, then nothing will help. So washing your hands and all the simple things which everybody has been talking about, and even littering. Don't throw litter. Littering, as I keep saying, is a potential source of health hazards. And at the same time in hawker centers, if the minister said don't eat eat and go back fast, return your tray because that will help also. Yes, that will help. That will help to reduce the problems, birds coming in to pick on your food. So all these other things which are all personal responsibilities that we all need to bear in mind. And I think this is where we have been trying to reach out to our Singaporeans, and hopefully some of these messages will get down to the ground.
Okay. So, Minister, yesterday you launched the national campaign to fight against dengue, right? So, we have also reported more cases this year compared to the same period last year.
Double.
So, what do you think would be the impact of a large increase in dengue cases, amid the current outbreak?
we ought to be reminded that last year there were 20 deaths arising out of dengue. And for us in Singapore, dengue is here to stay. The COVID-19 hopefully is here, but will go away. We must therefore not lose our sight on something which is also as dangerous, will also cause losses to we might lose our loved ones, those who are our friends, and even someone in our community. So, given that the increase in breeding, increase in infections in the community, and also the number of clusters around Singapore, we decided to bring forward the campaign to fight against the dengue mosquito. We call it the Mosquito Wipeout. Instead of doing it in May, we do it right in March, 2 months ahead. We hope that as much as we are worried about COVID-19, we must not lose sight of ensuring that the breeding places where these mosquitoes always like to breed, and these are usually our homes, we do not become lax. Yes, we start washing our hands. It's fantastic. We don't throw tissue. We don't leave tissues on the table. But please, continue to do the things that we have always been doing year after year to bring down and to keep suppressing the breeding of mosquitoes, because that's the only and best defense against dengue transmission.
So by reducing the breeding of mosquitoes and reducing the number of dengue cases, it kind of reduces the threat to the population.
Yes, it's almost like the Arnold.
Yeah.
So you kill the mosquitoes, you cannot eliminate dengue because we travel. So some of us will go out sometime and then they can contract dengue, and then they will come to within us. But if the mosquitoes do not breed as much or do not transmit as much, then the number of clusters will be small and the number of transmission will also be small. And this is quite apparent in Tampines in my division, where we have been releasing these Wolbachia mosquitoes for about 3 years. Now, in these areas where they have done this, the breeding of the mosquitoes or the index have gone down so much to suppress about 90 to 95% of this mosquito breeding. And do we have dengue situation in that area? Yes, we do. But because the number of mosquitoes is not that huge, it's not as much as what's normal, the clusters close quickly and the infection was very small. But we cannot rely on such technology alone. That means hoping that we can produce many of these Wolbachia mosquitoes and then releasing it everywhere where we have this problem. We really have to suppress this breeding first, so that this weapon can be used when we need it, not something that we keep using it when we don't. It's not just expensive. I do not know what the other effects, like social effects of having mosquitoes all around you all the time, and it's really irritating. But if we can keep it down, we don't have to suffer such problems.
Yes, so maybe I can add, it's really interesting, Minister, and also for Singapore now, during COVID-19, our dengue incidence actually doubled. So for your reader, general public, it's very important to know that COVID-19 and the dengue are two different viruses. COVID-19, we're worried about human-to-human transmission. That's why, the hygiene, the contact prevention and the social distance is very important. With dengue, as the minister said, it's going to stay in Singapore, and it's a mosquito vector transmitted virus. So it's really interesting. We're doing everything in terms of reduce the contact and the social distance. Yet for dengue, it's not having impact because it's a different virus. So we still need every citizen to work on to reduce the breeding. So these are two different viruses and two different approach. But the principle is the same. It's every citizen's responsibility.
The point is, we don't want to have two crises to fight.
Yeah.
So can I take on from that, from what Mr. and Prof. Wang has said? Actually, in my mind, in the earlier years, I was wondering what happened to people's fears on dengue. We had triple the number of cases.
Exactly.
Every year we have more deaths, but nobody cared. So I think it's and I think what Prof. Wang has said now, there are two different kinds of viruses in a way. But as far as the public hygiene is concerned, we feel that it covers both the COVID-19, the things that you have to do to take care of yourselves, as well as the dengue, because it's your personal health. It's your personal responsibility to ensure that you conduct and you handle things in the most responsible way. And that's why it's important, even for dengue, at home, you empty your trays and your utensils where there's water. And we hope that in time to come, irrespective of COVID, we should raise the standards of social norms, raise it above what is happening, bring back to a level whereby we can say that we are able to reduce and mitigate any other forms of potential viruses around. That's what I think we like to look at in the years ahead.
If our readers are not already frightened about dengue, let's give me one more fact. What we are discovering today, there's something called serotypes, and maybe Prof want to talk about this more. This is more a technical subject, but what I know is that what's spreading around now is what we call dengue 3. It's a serotype of dengue, which is not common in Singapore. All these years, we've had dengue 1, dengue 2, and that means all of us probably have some form of immunity against it. And the last time we had a dengue 3 outbreak was 30 years ago, which means that there's a generation of us which did not have the antibodies or the immunity against such a dengue 3. We are watching, we see what the impact of this is, but I am alarmed that it's not just an increase in the number of dengue cases, but there's a serotype change. We do not know what is called a serotype switch yet to announce this, but it's certainly something to cause alarm.
Actually, Prof, on that note, so I mean, Minister said with the spread of the new serotype, people would have less immunity built up against this. So does it mean that those infected with dengue will be more susceptible to COVID?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. So far, there's no scientific evidence because these are two different viruses, and the only possibilities is you're infected with dengue, may weaken your immune system and make you more susceptible. I think a few weeks ago, there was some kind of a report to say Singapore has the first patient has both COVID-19 and the dengue. And later, I think the scientific evidence suggests that it's an IgM positive for dengue, but PCR positive for COVID-19. So we have evidence of the virus in the body for COVID-19, but for dengue, it was an antibody test. But the IgM can stay in your body for a long time. So still, it's not the hardest evidence to say it's a co-infection. So it's a sequential infection. Somebody had a dengue and followed by COVID-19. So I don't think that we have strong enough evidence to say either infection dengue in the predisposed days or make you more likely to get infected with COVID-19 because the cases are so small right now.
So just to give our readers or viewers like a bit of a background, so basically a serotype test for antibodies, which is usually produced by the body after the infection.
Yeah, the serotype for dengue now we can do both. So we can, if the virus is still in your body, we can do a PCR and a sequencing to say clearly, and these are the more accurate tests, the genetic material. I always say this is black and white. You can tell it's 1, 2, 3, or 4. And as the minister says, usually it's 1 and 2 are more dominant in Singapore. And so we're watching the space. If 3 comes in, it means that the herd immunity, the general public, are less likely to be protected. But for dengue, it's also that it's another complicated situation is that if you had a different serotype, like if you have been exposed to dengue 1 or 2 before, now, if dengue 3 hit you, then you actually have more chance to get a severe dengue, something called antibody-dependent enhancement. So this is something that for dengue, and then for coronavirus, the scientific community is also watching that whether ADE will play a role.
So basically, the scientific research on co-infection between dengue and COVID is still not robust, but it will still help everyone, reduce the spread of 2 kinds of viruses going around by taking precautions against mosquito breeding.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, no matter which infection is going to attack your immune system, right? So that, which is bad. So that with the current COVID-19 circulating, you just want to keep healthy. and avoid any infection, whether it's dengue or COVID-19.
So on to other recent headlines.
Yeah.
Malaysia's news announcements about them restricting cross-border movement has been an issue of interest here in Singapore. So Mr. Tan, maybe you can just take us through whether this would affect the numbers of cleaners in Singapore who come from Malaysia?
Okay, I think when the restriction was first announced, I think the first thing we did was to get in touch with our MOM counterparts to facilitate any assistance they can give to our service providers that are providing the essential services to our nation to ensure that they continue to do so. Then as for the service providers, the companies themselves, for the public cleaning companies, they immediately actually activate their business continuity plans, which are BCP. Just to elaborate a bit more, when any companies that are providing cleaning services with us require, as part of the contract conditions, is that they must have a BCP to handle situations like this. So actually, we are actually planned for situations like this already. So immediately, the service provider will consolidate their manpower. We look at all the critical areas, and we deploy the resources to make sure that they still maintain an effective cleaning mission, cleaning plans. And NEA will work with them to further optimize their resource reallocation. And we also are trying to push for more areas to be cleaned by their mechanical road sweepers. Now, of course, on top of that, we are also need to prioritize certain critical areas. For example, drains. We cannot relax on that for purpose of dengue, mosquito breeding, mentioned earlier. For emptying of bins, we have to continue on because for hygiene reasons, and also for areas that has very high pedestrian footfall, we have to maintain the cleanliness. But for all other areas, we may have to reduce our cleaning frequencies, and we ask for residents' understanding that maybe for certain areas that's cleaned daily, we may have to actually clean maybe alternate days. So the leaves are there. They'll be there for a while. By maybe within 2 days, it should be cleaned up. Then as for our waste collection services, we may have to extend the waste collection timing. Currently, it actually stopped at 7 p.m. So from this situation, we may have to extend to 10 p.m. Into the night. So we ask also for residents' understanding that the refuse may be with them for a longer time, as our workers will try their best to remove it as quickly as possible. Our incineration plants remains unaffected. I'm happy to say that. But as for other waste management services, like maybe the waste recycling companies, we are still monitoring them carefully. I think when this thing happened, I think the first issue that we are most concerned about is the housing of the Malaysian workers who have chose to stay back to continue working in the companies. So immediately we actually touch base with all our service providers to get them to start arranging for accommodation for all the Malaysian workers who are staying here. So I'm glad to see that many of them actually have provided reasonable accommodation at very short notice. Hostel, dormitories, and I heard that even some of them provided even hotels. We are also in very close communication with the two associations that oversee these two industries to render assistance as and when required. So follow up from what Edward has said, actually our message to Singaporeans is this: please don't litter. Throw your litter into the bins. If everybody acted responsibly, we can still keep Singapore clean, even with the reduced manpower required to clean Singapore.
Can I share a bit on that as well?
Yes.
Just taking a minister, if you don't mind. This has been something which Public Hygiene Council has been aware of. And this incident here has highlighted to us where these gaps are, whereby we're talking about manpower. And we are looking at how we can move ahead in the years ahead, irrespective of COVID, how we can rely less on manpower per se, especially when most of our cleaners, I think, if you correct me if I'm wrong, are 60 years and above in age. And we need to really look carefully how we can plan so that the sources of cleaners coming on board will if they are reduced, then where do we go? How do we handle it? And I think Minister and Chai suggested to us that we look at mechanization, we look at using technology. So I think this is one area we can help in the years to come to help the cleaning operators or help them to raise the standards. Because there will be a point in time whereby the source of cleaners, the pool of cleaners will be much reduced. I keep saying this because the new batch of seniors are more literate, more financially well off, and it's unlikely that they will want to go into the cleaning industry in that sense. That's the hard truth in a sense. So I think, and also relying on foreign labor workers can have these side effects, these negative side effects. So we really have to look how we can have our cleaning operators and our Singaporeans take on the personal role. I think the example which I like to raise is in Taipei, whereby the citizens act as volunteers to come down to clean up the place. And I think, Minister, I think we talked about bright spots, which is an initiative whereby we're going to get the residents to come down to help clean up the place. So I think it's another area we're going to push further, and this is one example whereby we like to see them taking personal responsibility.
So, I mean, Edward, Singapore has been known as a clean city in reference to our army of cleaners. So, as Singapore battles COVID-19 now, do you think cleaners and cleaning crew should be afforded the same kind of appreciation as people are extending to our healthcare workers?
Okay, currently under the present circumstances, I think they should be given a degree of recognition because they are also stepping up their efforts, in this more robust regime, and I think both NEA and everybody else will be. I think they're coming up with schemes to help them in the way. I think I have to leave it to to NEA to talk about it. But I think they ought to be given the kind of recognition currently under the circumstances, And I think because many of them are old, senior 60s and above. And for them to step up and conduct all this is quite a big effort. And I think we should recognize them actually in that sense. Yeah.
I would say that on the ground, there are many initiatives that grassroots leaders, residents have been showing their appreciation for our cleaners, because they do recognize that their presence are now more felt, and the cleanliness actually is being upkept. And many times when I ask the cleaners, you are working really hard, are you okay? They say, we are doing our part. This is our duty. I'm very touched. Yeah. So I think we should continue this show of appreciation. Don't just do it once, bring hampers to them. In my constituency, for example, some of the coffee shops are giving them a treat of biryani. These are the small things. They're not looking for really big rewards and so on, because they know this is their job and it's their duty. But when we show them our appreciation, it makes their mission and their purpose recognized. And I think there's nothing small in this work that we are doing: cleaning, frontline, escorting, quarantine order enforcement. We have to do all these things, and small or big, let us show them our appreciation.
So I mean, this conversation has just really highlighted the importance of keeping Singapore clean even beyond this outbreak. But I'd just like to pose this question to the panel. What do you think are Singaporeans' best and worst hygiene habits? Maybe Minister, you can start with you.
Well, you call it habit because we take things for granted. For example, until recently, even myself, after I eat in a hawker center, I have my tissue paper. I'll put it inside, and I think that's not littering, and that's just keeping it away from the floor and so forth. But I'm beginning to recognize that these are also what I call now little biohazards that you leave on the table sometime, or even in your bowl. So therefore, we need to change so that not only are we not littering, why not adopt good personal hygiene standards, good eating habits, eat on a tray, so that if the food falls out of the tray, of your bowl, it falls on the tray, and then when we return the tray, and that's the other thing we should be doing too, the table is clean for the next person. Not only clean for the next person, you also want a clean table next time you come. At the same time, the cleaners do not have to do cleaning up after you, keeping it hygienic, sanitizing and everything. So we reduce the workload of the cleaners. So just by not littering on the table or leaving food all over the table, a habit which I think we all can adjust to, we can do a lot. We can start. We can save a lot of things on people's effort to help us.
What about the best habit, or what is the best anecdote that you can think of?
Generally speaking, our citizens and people who live in Singapore, they generally do not litter. And I've seen people actually pocket their litter. And I've seen people walk some distance before they throw things into the bins. There's just a few people who are very recalcitrant, who just, drop, they think it's a small thing, like a little bit of plastic bag, or after they eat under the void deck, leave bottles behind. These are the people, unfortunately, we have to enforce against. But generally speaking, we have a certain good standard in Singapore, but we really need to think about how to make that standard even higher, and then maintain that standard. Let's be honest. I mean, we are a first world country, but let's be honest whether we are already a first world people, where hygiene and cleanliness is concerned. It must be coming from here and not coming from somewhere enforcing against us. And I think that the jury is still out, whether we are doing it because we are enforcing it or because we really love to do it. I would love to assume that it is because we love our environment and we want to keep things clean.
Maybe the science can help. So, Prof.
Maybe I should make a comment first. For somebody who travel around the world and live and work in 4 different countries, I think one thing I was most impressed is, I think, a zero tolerance of food and drink in public transportation, even no water in MRT. So I still remember, when I first arrived in Singapore with my children, from Australia, and they could not believe that even water is not allowed. And I personally found that that's incredible. The whole society is used to that concept, and also they monitor. So when arrived, the daughter, children don't know, they're just drinking water. The people next to it, very gentle reminder to say, actually, we can tell you're from outside Singapore. Water is actually not allowed in MRT. So I was very impressed. Not only we have this policy and the citizens abide by, and they actually are helping visitors, the people just arrived in Singapore, to make sure, that's practiced.
But Prof. Wang, even before the outbreak, there have been many public hygiene recommendations in place, such as returning your trays and not littering. But can you just share what is the scientific basis behind not helping infectious diseases spread by practicing these personal hygiene methods? Like, for example, just now Edward mentioned that, by leaving food out, you can attract pigeons and other kinds of birds. Can you just elaborate a little bit more?
Scientifically, it's clear, right? There's when you have infectious material, whether it's a virus or bacteria, that, especially when you have food, the living organism can grow. So that's one thing. The other is that we already says, if you have any contact contaminants, on the table and things like that, if you leave longer, there's more chance for some person to come in. And then the mosquito and the birds, of course, these are the even more serious, right? Once the living animals, whether it's a mosquito or birds, get your food, then they will transmit and replicate in their body. So scientifically, without any doubt, that all of these will contribute to the growing of the pathogen and the spread of pathogen. Yeah.
Okay. I like that. One of the things I get a lot of, in NEA, people complain about birds, people complain about sitting on the tables. But really, we can solve this problem quite easily. Return the tray. All of us return the tray. The birds will learn there are no food on the table. And then they won't eat it, because you cannot expect our cleaners to be running after you every time you eat to clear the table so that the birds don't eat. Let's be more humane.
Mr. Masagos, after the SG Clean Task Force was announced, some colleagues and I went to a couple of hawker centres around Singapore, found that people were practicing better hygiene before their meals. They were wiping down their tables with hand sanitizer, but after their meals, they would just walk away and leave their trays there. But I mean, Edward, this question is for you actually. So after the article was published, some people wrote in to us to say that, oh, you know, sometimes there's not enough infrastructure in place, whether it be like tray return racks or even public bins. So what is your take on that?
I think that's another challenging issue that we are facing in the moment now. And I think we realized that we lag behind the curve to some extent in terms of the ecosystem of a hawker center in that sense. Many of the hawker centers were built many years ago. You know, so we have to live with that physical constraint. And the idea of having tray return trolleys was mooted by NEA before. But I think the ecosystem has highlighted a few gaps. The locations of these tray return facilities, sometimes they are out of sight. And from my own anecdotal observations and discussions, many of the patrons say that they can't be seen or they're too far to walk to the tray return trolleys. And I think that is something which we need to bear in mind in the designs of our future hawker centers and food courts. Secondly, also is the customer journey that we go through. Because when we realize when they finish the food, so if we want them to take the tray return facility should be as close as possible to them so that they don't have to walk a long way. These are just behavioral patterns, you see. So I think this is something which we can learn and we can improve working together with the hawker centers department and see how we can make this a better place. The other one is actually, we forget, is the cleaning operators also. The cleaning operators will have to also upskill themselves. And how we can help them mechanize to some extent, at the same time, educate and promote awareness to their own cleaners. Because there is this fear sometimes, and we hear this fear that the cleaners feel that it's their duty. But actually, they can do much a better, efficient job if they will be doing other things rather than just clearing your tray. So I think these are little things that we can tweak as we move in the months ahead, in that sense. So I think there's a lot that we can learn, and I think it's better that we accept these issues here and improve on them.
So I mean, beyond tray return at hawker centres, another issue that has come up today is the issue of littering. So maybe Mr. Tan, you can chime in on the number of public bins we have island-wide.
Well, just the public bins that is owned by NEA, we already have 11,000 over kind of bins, not counting even the town council bins, the shopping malls, they have the bins, the MRTs have their own bins. So actually, Singapore has no shortage of bins. and the bins are actually within very easy reach. So actually, there are really no reasons why a person can say that I cannot find a bin, so I just drop it. So it's just a short distance, you will find a bin somewhere.
In countries like Japan, I mean, there's no public bin in sight. So I would just like to end off by asking the panelists, any last words on this issue of keeping clean to keep well during the current outbreak? Minister?
I started by saying public hygiene, personal hygiene is our first defense. And it's not just our defense against COVID-19 today, but against other breakouts that we cannot foresee in future. In the last 20 years, there are already 4 breakouts that we were worried about: SARS, MERS, H1N1, and then now COVID-19. It just got worse and worse. It's either contagious or dangerous, and this time around it's both contagious and dangerous. And therefore, we do need to think deeply for ourselves and also for society, what we want and how we're going to ensure that what we do will build these defenses for the future. And nothing beats a better personal hygiene and understanding why we have to do it, and then to ensure that public hygiene is also ensured at the same time.
Anyone else? Edward?
Well, I think I echo Minister's vision. At the end of the day, and I will say this again, it's a personal responsibility to keep that every one of us should therefore bear in mind. And if we are able to be conscious of this personal responsibility acts that we can do, I think Singapore will be a much cleaner place in all sense of the word. So I think that's my own wish and my vision that I see down the road.
Okay, so I guess like this focus on personal hygiene is a good note to end off on, and I hope the viewers listening today would remember that take-home point. So that is all the time we have today, but one key message I think we can all take away from today's discussion is the importance of keeping clean to keep well during this outbreak of COVID-19. Keep up to date with the latest on the coronavirus in Singapore and around the world at straitstimes.com, and be sure to tune in to the regularly scheduled Big Story at 5:30 p.m. every weekday. Thank you all. I am Audrey Tan. Goodbye.